Tonight, travel turbulence ahead of a busy holiday weekend with WestJet pilots poised to walk off the job. The countdown as customers scramble to make new plans.
We are going to get stuck there unless they put us on another flight back home.
The deadline and the deadlock. Wildfire smoke smothers parts of Alberta.
I have never seen anything like this before.
Strides and setbacks as the province burns. Plus, after months of cooling, inflation heats up.
And I'm not sure where you can really cut corners at this time.
From food to fuel to housing, rising prices and the prospect of another interest rate hike.
CTV National News with Omar Sachedina. Reporting tonight, Sandy Ronaldo.
Good evening. Thousands of Canadians may see their long weekend travel plans canceled if a strike by WestJet pilots goes ahead.
I've been concerned about that this whole time I've been gone.
Our flight home is going to be a little iffy.
We really don't know what the backup plan is.
Nearly 1,900 pilots from WestJet and Swoop delivered notice they could walk off the job early Friday morning. A strike would not only disrupt departures, it could also leave passengers stranded. CTV's Heather Wright starts us off.
Passengers boarding WestJet flights this week are doing so with a great deal of uncertainty.
Scaring the hell out of me.
The union representing WestJet pilots has issued a 72-hour strike notice, the company responding with its own lockout notice, with 3 a.m. Mountain Time on Friday set as the deadline to get a new labor deal.
We are moving closer on certain areas, so there is a glimmer of hope there.
Captain Bernard Lewell is chair of the Union Executive Council. He says WestJet pilots are among the lowest paid in North America, making less than their Air Canada counterparts, and are losing hundreds of pilots every year to other airlines.
And that attrition rate is picking up.
In a statement, WestJet says it remains committed to finding a reasonable agreement as soon as possible, but accuses the union of being unrealistic. The union maintains its expectation of closing in towards U.S.-like wages, despite living and working in Canada.
This is going to be pretty bumpy over the next few days.
Duncan Dee is a former executive with Air Canada and says the impact of this labor dispute will be felt before the Friday deadline, as WestJet will need to get all planes back to their home airports before any strike action.
It'll intensify into Thursday, and if we do end up in a full-blown strike, we're going to start seeing wholesale flight cancellations throughout the WestJet network starting Friday morning.
WestJet says in the event of delays or cancellations, passengers will be refunded or rebooked. Those stuck outside Canada would be eligible for compensation for out-of-pocket expenses, like hotels and meals, and even lost wages.
They'll just try to get us home within 48 hours. That's the best they can do, and it sucks.
And getting on a new flight not guaranteed, as most flights are packed, with travelers taking off for the long weekend.
We are going to get stuck there unless they put us on another flight back home, so we don't know. This is a stressful situation.
Both sides remain at the bargaining table, and negotiations will continue up until the deadline on Friday. Sandy.
All right, Heather, thank you. Albertans woke up to haze over cities like Edmonton and Calgary as shifting winds carried smoke from dozens of burning wildfires across the province. A special air quality statement was issued just as some folks were given a reprieve and got to go home. CTV's Alberta Bureau Chief Bill Fortier reports.
Slowly, the town of Drayton Valley, empty for nearly 2 weeks, is starting to look like itself again.
It feels good. It's nice.
The evacuation order ended this afternoon for the town's 7,000 residents after a raging wildfire narrowly missed the community, taking out 4 to 6 homes on the edge of town.
The 25 firefighters that are our force, they stopped. They pretty much did, in my opinion, save the town.
Positive developments there. And in the northern city of Grand Prairie, a fire that was out of control is now considered under control.
Essentially, we've created a barrier between the edge of the fire and where the hot spots are.
But across the province, the fight is far from over, with around 24 fires still burning out of control.
The wildfire landscape is still changing as we see some wildfires contained and others starting up.
Today, more communities were added to the list of evacuation orders. More than 1,000 evacuees are now calling the town of Whitecourt a temporary home.
It's humbling, like everyone stepped up their game, and it's community helping community.
I have no hesitation in saying, doesn't matter how long it is, we'll be here.
In Smoky Fox Creek, it's hard to tell how close the fire actually is. The entire region blanketed by a thick haze. And that smoke has drifted across the province. An air quality advisory has been issued for most of Alberta.
People with any type of health conditions of COPD or asthma are at risk, or people with allergies.
Because the levels are over 6 right now across much of the province, it'll affect the general population as well.
Tuesday morning, the Air Quality Health Index reached 8 in Edmonton, which is considered high risk.
Obviously, when you breathe heavy, going for a run or anything like that, you can definitely feel it.
In Calgary, even worse, the index reaching 10 plus.
I would consider that I have good lungs, and it's even hard for myself to breathe in and breathe out.
And with no significant rain in the forecast, officials are now pleading with Albertans to respect the fire bans in place across the province, reducing the risk of accidentally making a bad situation even worse. Bill Fortier, CTV News, Whitecourt, Alberta.
Now, 4 wildfires are also burning in northeastern BC, prompting an evacuation alert for Fort St. John's 21,000 residents. Some 400 firefighters are battling a wildfire suspected to be caused by humans. And in northwestern Saskatchewan, a raging wildfire triggered a local state of emergency in the rural community of Isle-à-la-Crosse. The elderly and those with health issues told to leave. Well, the red-hot inflation rate had been cooling off, but new numbers show an unexpected spike last month, the first increase in nearly a year. At its peak, inflation reached 8.1%, and while the annual rate in April was down to 4.4%, that is up slightly from March. As CTV's Manitoba Bureau Chief Jill Makashon reports, the rise is fueled by gas, housing, and groceries.
Just when Canadians thought the cost of living was starting to stabilize, new inflation data shows it went up again.
No.
It sure did. Food, which had been one of the biggest drivers, saw increases again in April. Some fresh fruit, coffee, and tea, but lettuce dropped in price. Still, for shoppers, the only noticeable decrease is at the till.
Yeah, the amount of stuff I buy.
I'm not sure where you can really cut corners at this time. Maybe travel.
Fuel prices are up month over month, a 6.3% increase from March to April. Rent prices up 6.1% year over year, and mortgage interest costs jumped 28.5% from 2022. Higher interest rates brought in to cool inflation, now adding to the increase.
Those user costs, those are going up. So in some sense, it's a kind of a dog chasing its tail. You're trying to get the inflation down, but the bank is, in the short term, contributing to it.
This increase is the first since rates peaked last June. Then the inflation rate was 8.1%. The Bank of Canada has set a target of 2%. All eyes are now on May rates to see if the upward trend continues.
The question is going to be, at what point is the Bank of Canada's patience going to be tested? And I think this number today could tilt the balance.
The looming possibility again of interest rate hikes. The Bank of Canada will issue its next overnight rate target June 7th. Jill Makashon, CTV News, Winnipeg.
Money is at the heart of a dispute between Ottawa and car maker Stellantis, with accusations the federal government is not living up to promises. Construction at the electric vehicle battery plant in Windsor, Ontario, shut down yesterday. Now the industry minister says the province needs to step up.
We are at a crossroad now, is that we need our friends and partners in Ontario to pay their fair share.
Francois-Philippe Champagne made the comments in South Korea, where he arrived with the Prime Minister for a visit focused on economic security and climate change. Well, the move to a green economy got a boost today from Canada and the U.S., with more details on the alternative fuel corridor for electric vehicle charging stations.
Today is only the beginning, because we will continue to build green corridors between our two countries.
Our goal is for EV drivers to be able to travel far and wide without ever having to wonder or worry about finding a place to charge.
The passageway will stretch 1,400 kilometers from Kalamazoo, Michigan to Quebec City. 215 charging stations will be built, including 61 between Toronto and Detroit. The corridor was discussed during U.S. President Joe Biden's visit to Ottawa in March. Well, Ottawa answered a plea today from police and the premiers to get tougher on crime. A new law will make it more difficult for some repeat dangerous offenders to get bail and puts the onus on them to convince the judge. As CTV's Ottawa Bureau Chief Joyce Napier reports, a police killing was the catalyst for change.
The murder of Ontario Provincial Police Constable Greg Pershala, ambushed by a man with a criminal record who was out on bail, is one of the cases that prompted loud calls for action on bail reform in Canada. And today, the federal government announced it is tightening the rules.
There have been a number of high-profile incidents, and that there's a feeling of insecurity out there, and we are addressing that.
The bill tabled by the Trudeau government targets violent offenders and cases involving firearms, knives, bear spray, and other weapons, making it harder in those cases to get bail.
Repeat violent offenders who pose a risk to community safety should not be released while awaiting trial.
Under the bill, those repeat offenders would have to prove they should be freed on bail. It would no longer be up to the prosecutors to argue the accused should await trial behind bars. Not enough, says the Conservative leader.
Today, Liberals announced measures on bail that would have continued to release the same killer who killed Constable Pershala. In other words, they have not reversed catch and release.
To some, the new rules are just a Band-Aid solution.
And we're trying to solve wicked social problems with more jail time, when we need to start addressing what's creating the crime in the first place.
This criminal lawyer says rehabilitation, not bail reform, should be the priority.
The number of clients that I have who don't have housing, who can't access treatment, who are cut off from supports, who are living below the poverty line, who don't have access to legal counsel or funding.
The bail reform comes after months of political pressure from the opposition, the country's police chiefs, and all the premiers who urge the federal government to keep dangerous criminals off the streets. Today, some of those provinces voiced their support. Sandy?
Joyce, thank you. A member of parliament targeted by China testified on Parliament Hill today. It happened as CSIS was given a new directive to tell MPs whenever they face foreign threats. But Michael Chong wants the government to go much further and name names. CTV's Judy Trin reports.
Michael Chong did not find out until 16 days ago that China was targeting him, even though CSIS may have known for at least 2 years. Chong told the committee he's received threats, but didn't suspect an orchestrated campaign by the PRC.
One of the incidences involved something that happened in the last federal election campaign. The other incidences were outside of the federal election campaign.
Alleged perpetrator, Chinese diplomat Zhao Wei, has now been expelled. Chong wants him censured, and he's calling on the government to compel CSIS to name names and identify in Parliament the foreign agents who are targeting politicians, like the United Kingdom has done.
The government needs to act. To not act is to make our democracy needlessly more vulnerable to the threat of foreign interference.
Other citizens are vulnerable too. Mehmet Toti, a Uyghur activist, suspected he was monitored. He deliberately cut ties with his family to protect them. He gave CSIS this recording. It's a veiled threat about family members who have been disappeared in China. The message came 2 weeks before Parliament voted to take in 10,000 Uyghur refugees, a cause Toti supported.
You live constantly under the shadow of Chinese iron fist, and how you can be safe, how you can be free.
This expert in U.S.-China relations says how Canada deals with foreign interference can impact the relationship with its closest ally.
It is of growing importance to the United States that we compare notes
that neither of us present a vulnerability to the other.
In just a few weeks, Canada's resiliency to foreign interference will be tested in 4 federal by-elections. The Trudeau government says it will increase monitoring of potential threats. Sandy.
Judy, thank you. And Russia posed a serious threat to Ukraine overnight, launching a huge barrage of missiles at the capital. Kyiv says it intercepted all 18 missiles destined for the city, including 6 hypersonic weapons. Russia claims to have destroyed a U.S.-made Patriot air defense system, something that is unconfirmed. Time for a short break, but when we come back...
Should kids in elementary school and kindergarten be exposed to drag queen reading time? Is that what you're asking?
A premier pressed about a contentious policy review. Plus, a Florida researcher sets a new underwater record. Investigators in Montreal are trying to determine whether there's a link between 2 deliberately set fires involving over 24 vehicles. More than 20 cars were destroyed in the parking lot of a shipping company early this morning. They were to be sent to the Middle East and to Africa.
The information we have so far is that 2 suspects have been seen on the scene just before the fire started.
A short distance away and less than 2 hours later, more cars were engulfed by flames in a scrapyard. Arsonists had targeted both sites in November. New Brunswick's premier was in the hot seat today, defending a provincial plan to review school policy which protects the rights of LGBTQ2S+ students. The reevaluation comes after the education minister claims to have received hundreds of complaints. CTV's Alison Sampson reports.
Premier Blaine Higgs was grilled over his government's plan to review a 3-year-old policy, 713. Then he was asked by reporters whether kids are born gay.
I'm not going to surmise or be hypothetical
No,
on
but
what
I mean,
I think.
but when
No,
we're talking about an
don't
age
know.
limit in school,
I don't know.
The premier went on to question whether kids should attend drag story time.
Are we asking should kids in elementary school and kindergarten be exposed to drag queen reading time? Is that what you're asking?
What's your answer?
Because no, I don't think they should be at that age.
Prior to this, Scrum Policy 713 was the focus of question period today. The policy was introduced to create safe, welcoming, inclusive, and affirming school environments for students of all sexual orientations and gender identities. The Higgs government is reviewing it because the Department of Education says they've received hundreds of complaints. The department provided the province's child and youth advocate with only 4 emails regarding the policy, one of which was to strengthen it.
The minister can review anything he likes. Our position is let's have clear terms of reference, make it clear that the rights and aims of the policy are going to remain.
It's the government's role as a leader to address those fears with clear communication, with explanations of their policy and curriculum, and not try to divide parents into us and them categories.
Alison Sampson, CTV News, Fredericton.
Still ahead, a tale of criminal masterminds now behind bars after a real-life jewelry heist. Five members of a notorious German gang were convicted today for robbing a museum. The group almost got away with more than 4,000 stolen diamonds. It's what's being dubbed the biggest art heist in modern history. As CTV's chief international correspondent Paul Workman reports, there's also a Canadian connection.
The defendants appeared in court with their faces concealed as German law guarantees. One of them hid behind his green hat. Another drew laughter hiding behind his own newspaper headline. 5 went to jail, all members of the Remo clan, one of Germany's most notorious organized crime families. As robberies go, it was audacious, smashing cases at Dresden's famous Green Vault Museum, making off with a treasure load of 18th century diamonds and jewels valued at $165 million. The thieves broke in through a window and set fires to conceal their getaway, baffling the police. Last January, divers searched through the icy waters of a Berlin canal as the case reached a climax. Most, but not all of the pieces were recovered in a plea deal that left a lot of Germans holding their noses. The police didn't have a clue, said the presiding judge. Without a deal, we never would have got the jewelry back. As for the Canadian connection, 2 of the jewel thieves had already been convicted of stealing a very heavy $1 million gold coin from a Berlin museum, one of a series made and sold by the Royal Canadian Mint, known as the Big Maple Leaf. Never recovered, by the way, and likely melted down. In court today, the Remo robbers were given relatively light sentences. One of them apologized for what he called a gigantic mistake and promised to start a new, crime-free life. Paul Workman, CTV News, London.
And a promising discovery about human endurance, thanks to a professor called Dr. Deep Sea. The Florida researcher set a world record for the longest time spent living underwater, 74 days. His goal is to stay in the 9-meter deep Key Largo Lagoon for 100 days. After the break, the Skills Cafe.
You should never judge a book by its cover.
Rewriting the chapter for on-the-job training. A small cafe in Montreal has a unique recipe for success. It's providing opportunities to special needs students, giving them the kind of hands-on experience needed in the workforce. CTV's Vanessa Lee reports.
Nestled inside a senior's home in a Montreal suburb, this cafe is serving up much more than coffee and sandwiches.
Hello, Karen.
Hey! How are you? It's giving students like Zach Cruz a chance to learn valuable skills.
Serving coffee and baked goods, making sandwiches, spicy tuna or bagels and lox, and also done washing dishes and the cash register. And
Montreal's Summit School opened this cafe last year. Its goal, to better prepare its neurodiverse students to enter the workforce.
I believe in myself that I can succeed for when it comes to finding a new job.
But often those with disabilities face discrimination.
Like, you should never judge a book by its cover because it's wrong.
Only 1 in 4 people with an intellectual disability has a steady job. And at just 14%, adults with autism have the lowest employment rate in Canada.
It's not equal opportunity, and that's why our businesses need to shift their paradigm, and they need to start looking at their spaces differently and thinking about how can we be more inclusive.
Students aren't just learning how to cook and bake. There is also teamwork and problem solving, assets in any field.
My dream is to work in a real restaurant.
A new generation of workers eager to show off their talents to employers willing to give them a chance. Vanessa Lee, CTV News, Montreal.
And that's our newscast for this Tuesday. Thank you for sharing your time with us. I'm Sandy Ronaldo for Omar and all of us at CTV National News. Good night until tomorrow.